This is the story of an Antarctic fish that's being hunted to commercial extinction, the Patagonian toothfish. It's a story of a cat-and-mouse game played by navies and ruthless pirates about big money and greed in a multi-million-dollar illegal business stretching halfway across the globe. The pirates and their business backers are killing off a fish they call white gold.
It's over there.
It's also the story of a crusade to stop the pirates. Isofish, a non-government organization backed by the legitimate fishing industry in Australia. Isofish is led by this man, Alistair from Hobart in Australia.
I was attending a meeting of CAMLR, that's the Convention for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources. I first became aware from reports from scientists that Patagonian toothfish stocks were being attacked very heavily by poachers and pirates. This is the Isofish website, which is the core of the Isofish project, which is designed to collect and disseminate information on boats suspected of or known to be involved in poaching for Patagonian toothfish in the Southern Ocean. I mean, these guys are utter rogues, and for instance, they paint out the names of their boats, they paint out their port of registry, they break all the rules in the book in order to try and avoid detection. They have military-grade radar on board these boats so that they can effectively evade naval patrols. So it's a real cat-and-mouse game where the mice have significant advantages.
The toothfish, although ugly, is delicious, fetching top dollars. Fishmongers call it Californian or Antarctic sea bass for better sales.
Scientists reckon that the fish can live for 50, 60, 70, even 80 years. It may take 8 years before it's old enough to spawn. If the fish stocks get overfished, it can be very many years before they'll come back. The fish is called white gold for very good reasons. At the moment its fetching price is around $10 US per kilogram landed, which is an awful lot of money. Patagonian toothfish are found throughout the Southern Ocean, which is this area at the bottom of the map. And this is the main area of poaching activity. You can find toothfish south of South Africa, Prince Edward and Marion Islands, which are South African possessions. The Crozet Islands here, which are French, Kerguelen, French, Heard Island, Australian. And this red line here marks the area of CAMLR. So any fishing in here that isn't licensed by CAMLR is essentially in breach of the CAMLR Convention.
Alistair and his organization Isofish have a problem. Through a network of contacts and a huge database, he's learned there's a fleet of some 15 pirate fishing boats stealing toothfish round the French island of Crozet in the Southern Ocean. In a fax to the French Navy, Alistair is voicing his concern.
This is our ongoing liaison with French authorities in Réunion, where their naval patrols are based that protect their waters around Crozet and Kerguelen from toothfish poachers. We sent them a memo advising them of a whole bunch of poachers around Crozet and Kerguelen.
The French Navy on Réunion Island are also worried and reply that they will try to react.
This is just dramatic to have the French government and conservation NGOs working together so intimately and so closely in common cause.
Lieutenant Commander Michel Leclerc is captain of the French patrol boat, the Albatros.
We have a legislation very strong against illegal fishing in this zone, and we have a patrol ship to control and to survey the zone.
Nevertheless, the French Navy has a problem. From Réunion, they must first steam more than 2,000 nautical miles south towards the Antarctic before they reach the Crozet Islands. That gives the pirates a significant advantage. Crozet is one of the many tiny rocky islands in the Southern Ocean around Antarctica, where the much-prized Patagonian toothfish is found and also pirated. This is a French territory surrounded by a 200-mile zone in which only vessels with a license can fish. To conserve stocks, these licenses are heavily restricted. This is what happened when the French Navy spotted a Portuguese vessel fishing inside the economic zone surrounding Crozet Island.
On a standard 5 or 7 week fishing trip, these poachers might expect to take anything from 500 to 800 tons. We're talking about several $1 million worth of fish for a month's fishing, which means that you can pay off a boat in a week or two.
The skipper of this boat had more than $1 million worth of toothfish on board. The fish was confiscated and he was fined. Other groups have been active trying to expose the pirates. When the Greenpeace vessel Arctic Sunrise sighted an unmarked boat fishing inside the zone surrounding the French Kerguelen Islands, it became the start of a 3,000-mile chase across the Southern Ocean. Denise Boyd was Greenpeace's expedition leader on that voyage.
Was quite clearly indulging in illegal fishing activities given the large number of seabirds that we could see around the vessel. We couldn't see any markings on it to identify it, but they obviously weren't too keen to see anybody else because approximately 1 minute after we'd spotted each other, and we'd actually eyeballed each other, they turned to the east and increased speed and shot off, and that was the start of a 17-day chase. The logbook just shows, they changed courses various times. During daylight the next day, we sent some inflatables over. It was a peaceful mission. However, our inflatable crews were met with the entire crew dressed in with balaclava so that you couldn't see their faces. All the identifying features of the ship had been blanked out, so you couldn't see the call sign, you couldn't see her name.
There's a guy about to throw a rock. Where? Just in front of the bridge housing. Here it comes. Here it comes.
The crew threw rocks towards the crew of the inflatable in order to repel them for whatever reason. They had no intention of boarding their vessel.
Undeterred by the rock-throwing incident, the Arctic Sunrise launched their helicopter to try to discover the pirate vessel's name. When the Greenpeace inflatable went alongside to ask the boat's name, they were told it was the Isla Gunblain. The crew checked with Alistair Graham by sending a picture of the unmarked vessel back on the internet.
We've got a digital picture which we can send you, and perhaps we can get some identification sometime soon. The measurements that we've been able to take from here would indicate it's about 55 metres long.
Here is the first photograph, then unidentified, received by us from Greenpeace on the 3rd of March. And we were able to assist in the identification of this vessel by comparing boats involved in poaching with photos we already had on file. And here is a boat on file from the Australian Fisheries Management Authority, arrested for poaching in Australian waters the previous year. It took us about 2 days to agree that we had identified the Salvora.
Records reveal that the Salvora was registered in Belize and operated through a chain of South American companies by owners from Vigo in Spain. Despite heavy seas, the pirate vessel was still prepared to make a run for it. Greenpeace continued the chase for 7 days, revealing they knew the identity of the boat. Then on the 7th day, the vessel uncovered its number and name, showing it was indeed the Salvora, registered in Belize. There was then a strange incident. The Arctic Sunrise received a radio message purporting to come from a legal vessel fishing inside the French economic zone.
Is that correct? You're fishing on the position 49 degrees south and 72 degrees east. Is that correct? Over.
The legal boat claimed they have sighted a pirate. Would Arctic Sunrise investigate?
Long line now fishing.
We don't know who this is. We haven't got anyone on this, but I think it's these guys. Okay.
The radio message was traced back to the captain of the Salvora only a few hundred meters away. He was trying to divert them from the chase.
Thanks for your information, and for the moment, I'm off. Bye-bye.
In part 2, how the Salvora and its pirate catch finally escaped. All vessels, be they legal like this one or illegal, catch toothfish by means of a system called long-lining. It's a line containing tens of thousands of hooks that can stretch as far as 5 nautical miles behind the boat. These hooks also snare birds, particularly albatrosses, who dive for the bait. Now, because of the number of toothfish pirates, some 5 species of albatross are at risk.
That same bait is very attractive food for albatrosses. They're attracted to the boats, they see they're paying out long lining, they dive on the hooks, and once they're caught on the hooks, they get dragged down, drowned and killed. When it comes to the breeding season, and these birds are working hard to feed their chicks, they look for food close to these islands, just where these boats are fishing, and we find that far too many are getting killed, so many that unless something is done, these species will become extinct.
Scientists have placed satellite transmitters on albatrosses to show how some birds suddenly disappear. They analyze the results here at the British Antarctic Survey Base in Cambridge, England.
The satellite tags allow us to monitor the positions of the birds day and night. This bird here is going out for around about 22 days, 1,000 kilometres round to where it stopped. But we have tracks that go 15,000 kilometres. Here we've got a tagged female wandering albatross going out towards South America, coming round and down the Patagonian shelf. It's foraging for its chick at Bird Island, comes down the shelf and finally stops somewhere off the shelf break of South America. More than likely it's got caught on a long line.
In the Patagonian tooth fishery, we estimated that the bycatch of birds, principally by the illegal pirate fishers, was around 100,000 birds a year, of which about 10 to 20,000 were albatrosses. That's completely unsustainable for the populations of those albatross species concerned.
Day 8 of the pursuit, but now the Salvora's engines were beginning to fail. The 2 boats, however, were at least on speaking terms.
Yeah, we want to know, is your intention still to fish for toothfish in Camelar waters? Yeah, ask them, do you have a permit to fish in Camelar waters?
No, Greenpeace, nous toujours pêcher dans les mers internationales, nous n'est pas pêcher dans de l'eau des camarades.
He keeps saying that there, they were not fishing, and they didn't have the right to fish, and they weren't fishing.
By day 12, the Salvora had limped towards the Indian Ocean island of Mauritius. Mauritius has always taken a very close interest in the toothfish trade. The Arctic Sunrise had radioed ahead to the government of that island and demanded that the Salvora be detained and the catch confiscated. When a government gunboat came out to meet the 2 vessels, it looked as if Mauritius was prepared to help. Matt Gianni, Greenpeace's Oceans Director, takes up the story.
While Greenpeace was chasing the Salvora, we were regularly communicating to a variety of governments that potentially involved in this issue. We called on the Australian government, other governments in the region to ensure enforcement action was taken, and of course, once we realized that the Salvora was going to go into Mauritius, we began calling on the Mauritius government to seize the vessel, conduct an investigation, and on that basis of the investigation to take enforcement action if so warranted. We had people working in Mauritius, talking to the Prime Minister's office, talking with the press, and talking with the French, the Australian, and other embassies in Mauritius to try to get international action coordinated to take enforcement to seize and arrest the Salvora. What the Mauritian government finally agreed to was to conduct an inspection of the Salvora when it arrived in Mauritius. And this was something of a breakthrough.
After it was agreed to move the Salvora to Port Louis Harbour in Mauritius, it looked as though Greenpeace had scored a great coup. With the world's press watching, Mauritius was putting up a convincing display of environmental concern, but it wasn't quite like that.
There was a hearing of sorts. The Salvora basically presented evidence claiming that the Salvora was not fishing where we found it, but 300 to 400 miles further to the north in an area outside of French jurisdiction, and presented that as evidence that they were fishing entirely legally. The Salvora basically cooked its logbooks. They presented false evidence before the courts in Mauritius.
All records had been wiped and the logbooks had quite clearly been falsified, because it showed at the date and time that we found the Salvora at Kerguelen Island, she was claiming to be about 300 nautical miles away from that position.
We presented our logbooks as evidence, the video that we had taken of the Salvora, the positioning instruments that we had used to identify our exact location when we saw the Salvora. The courts, without explicitly saying so, basically came to the conclusion that Greenpeace was right and the Salvora was wrong, and in fact the boat was fishing illegally. However, Mauritius has no jurisdiction over illegal fishing outside of its 200-mile zone. So the Mauritius government said that Salvora has not broken any Mauritian laws.
Throughout, the Salvora never once admitted to illegal fishing inside French waters.
What the government eventually did agree to was to deny the Salvora the permission to actually land its fish. And this is something the Salvora was very, very anxious to do. It had over $1 million worth of fish on board. Eventually the Salvora left. After several weeks in Port Louis, our best guess is that the Salvora transshipped at sea. A freighter that specializes in taking fish catches from boats at sea took the catch from the Salvora and took it off to marketplace.
The Salvora was registered in Belize under what is known as a flag of convenience. It means the boat's owners simply paid money to use the flag of the country of Belize.
The Salvora is a classic example of the flags of convenience fishing. The Belize government should have asked the Mauritius government to arrest the vessel, and then the Belize government should have stripped that boat of its flag, fined it, and possibly given jail time to the owners of the vessel. That's what should have happened. But unfortunately, under international law, countries like Belize, Panama, and Honduras can issue flags to fishing vessels, turn a blind eye. Those boats can fish anywhere in the world's oceans that they please, catch as much as they can catch illegally, and get away with it. It's high seas robbery, it's high seas piracy.
So who really owned the Salvora? Disguised by its Belize flag of convenience, its ownership was traced through an Argentinian company, Clayton Trading, to a company, Morabel, near the huge fishing port of Vigo in Spain. One of the then owners of Morabel was Manuel Mora, filmed here with a hidden camera.
He owns the Salvora. It was caught in French waters.
It was in Australian waters.
The Salvora was caught in Australian waters.
Yeah, it was caught in Australian waters, but also in French waters a year later.
No, we had nothing to do with the French, just Australian.
Does it matter under Spanish law that they are inside other people's economic zones?
If a ship has a foreign flag, it has nothing to do with Spain. The boat wasn't even Spanish.
Why did the Salvora choose Mauritius Harbour for its port to run to? It is known to the pirates as the world's capital for landing illegally caught toothfish. Australian Jeff Williamson is also a member of the Isofish campaign. He's here tracking the pirate boats mentioned earlier that were fishing illegally around the Crozet Islands. Jeff is an expert in this field. Last year, he produced a devastating report on what happens in the harbour of Port Louis.
Here we are in Port Louis, the main harbour within Mauritius. This harbour is known to be a haven for boats engaged in the illegal Patagonian toothfish trade. And many of the boats that we had intelligence on as fishing in the Crozet area have quietly slipped into this harbour and discharged their catch. We can see several boats around here, some well known within the illegal toothfish trade. Here we have the Grand Prince, and it's known to be allied to interests within the Spanish fishing industry, and it has recently discharged Patagonian toothfish.
Here is the Grand Prince filmed 3 months later, fishing illegally in the waters around the French Kerguelen Islands.
The Cisne Azul has been working very closely with the Grand Prince. They've been moored together here, they've been sharing equipment and doing repairs together. It's recently discharged Patagonian toothfish in the last few days in this port here.
The Grand Prince and the Cisne Azul were both moored next to Mauritius Coast Guard vessels, the same Coast Guard that had taken such an interest in the Salvora and its illegal catch. During the investigation, Earth Report asked the Mauritius government and the Prime Minister's office several times for an interview to explain why they allow their harbour to be used to offload illegal toothfish catch. The Mauritius government refused to comment.
Another vessel is the Chatier d'Arc. It's a Ukrainian vessel. Currently, the licence has been revoked by the French authorities. Over here we have a boat which is called the Rita.
The Rita, registered in Belize, particularly intrigued Jeff Williamson. It looked familiar. On a previous visit, Jeff had photographed the same Norwegian-owned boat, then called the Cindy. Jeff sent the pictures back to colleague Alistair Graham.
Here we have some photographs of the Cindy poaching fish in the Southern Ocean and now coming into Mauritius to unload. We had someone in Mauritius, and these are photographs which they took on the wharf as the Cindy was unloading.
In part 2 of White Gold,
Hello, Mr. Odberver.
We talked to the Norwegian owner of the Rita and to other pirates. And we show how Alistair Graham's organisation has helped to shut down Norway's illegal fleets, and how the French Navy are taking the toughest possible action against pirate vessels by sinking them.